Welcome to the space between two lines. I'm Alex Saunders, and this is a space for real, honest conversations about fertility, pregnancy loss, and the journey to parenthood. Here, we hear the stories of people navigating the highs, the lows, and everything in between. A place to feel seen, understood, and less alone. Because every story matters, and so does yours. Today's episode is with Abbey, who shares her journey through recurrent pregnancy loss while trying for their third baby. After multiple D&Cs and 2 unsuccessful IVF egg collections and transfers, she opens up about the heartbreak of still searching for answers and the incredibly hard decision to close the chapter on IVF. Abbey now works as a fertility coach, using her experience to support others navigating infertility, loss, and IVF. This is a raw and honest conversation about loss, uncertainty, and letting go. Welcome to the podcast, Abbey. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Hello.
Would you like to start by introducing yourself to our audience and just telling us what your life looks like at the moment?
Sure. So I am 36 and I've got 2 girls. My oldest is about to turn 10 this weekend, and then my other one is 9 in August. So there's only a year between them. And maybe 4 years ago, we started trying for third baby. That's sort of where my whole life sort of took a bit of a turn. So I've been going through secondary infertility for the last 4 years, something I never really thought would be part of my life. It's calmed down a little bit at the moment, but it's definitely shaped sort of the trajectory of where my future's gone. So I am doing fertility coaching now for that reason, and grief coaching with people that are trying to conceive and doing IVF and, going through all those emotions. And yeah, I own a couple of other businesses. I'm married. I've been with my husband since we were 15. So yeah, that's sort of where my life's at the moment. And yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, a big part of today's conversation will be about your secondary infertility journey, but I just want to take you back to the conception of your other 2 children and what that kind of looked like for you. Were there any complications? Was it quite easy for you to conceive?
Yeah, so me and my husband got married in 2014, and then we moved into our house the next year. And we sort of had talked about, when did we want to have children? And he was a bit on the fence, and I was like, I want to have kids now. But I thought I'll come off the pill because it might take a while, because the doctors sort of say, it can take up to 2 years. I came off the pill and I pretty much fell pregnant straight away. So it was a bit of a shock. And that pregnancy was, look, I had a lot of fluid and I wore compression stockings for my whole pregnancy. I gained about 40 kilos, but it was pretty uneventful in the way of risk-wise. So I had a water birth, beautiful birth there, and she was 6 months old, and I surprisingly found out I was pregnant again. So that was a huge shock, and oh my God, I've got a 6-month-old. How am I going to have 2 babies? But it's the best thing ever now because they're 2 girls and they're the best of friends. So it was a big shock for me to then struggle to have another baby because I was so fertile, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So now I want to take you through when you made that decision that the time was right for you to extend your family and you did want to
Yeah.
start trying for a third baby.
So after my second, I went back on the pill because we were done. We're like, we don't want any more children. And life was pretty chaotic then. My husband had a few mental health issues when the girls were babies. And we were like, we don't want any more kids. And I was starting to get my life back. And then he was actually booked in to have the snip. And he had an appointment with his doctor, and he got off the phone and he said to me, so they said to me, you can't go into this thinking, I'll reverse it if I want to in a few years. And he's like, this needs to be a permanent decision. And he was like, so I'll book the appointment and I'll go. And it was at that moment that I'm like, I actually don't think I want this to happen. So we spoke about it for a while, and things had really calmed down then. His mental health was fantastic, and like the girls were a bit older, and we were like, okay, he came home actually one day and said, all right, I've been thinking about it. and I think we should have a third baby. I know you really want one, and I'm all for it. Let's do it. So we were really excited, but we had a big holiday booked, a 5-week holiday in the caravan. And I was like, I don't want to conceive before then because I want to enjoy this holiday with the girls and I don't want to be pregnant. And I don't really enjoy being pregnant either. So I was like, I don't want to go on this trip being pregnant. We'll start trying on the holiday. And I actually conceived on that holiday. So we started trying on our trip and I came home from that holiday pregnant. And that was sort of where everything, turned to shit. So I found out I was pregnant. I did a few tests, but before you go through any infertility, I think you take 1 or 2 tests and you're like, cool, I'm pregnant. I'll just wait for the scan. And that's sort of the end of the story. And that was where I was at on this holiday. And I came back and told everyone we were pregnant. I went to the scan and everything was perfect. Baby was perfect. And we had scans all the way up to 14 weeks, like just the regular scans. It was great. We told everyone, we announced it. And then it was near Christmas and I caught COVID. And then, like, a huge histamine response to COVID. Like, I had a rash all over my feet, but I wasn't really sick. And I had just had a scan the week before. So I was like, the baby's fine. And then I went for another scan just to check that the baby was okay. And they were like, yeah, the baby's still fine. Nothing's happened from COVID. But it was only a week after that I started having these nightmares that I had lost the baby and I just couldn't shake it. And I had no other symptoms, no bleeding, no nothing. I just could not shake it. And at that point, I was 15 weeks pregnant and I went up to maternity and I said to them, I just can't shake it. I'm just a nervous wreck and can you just put the Doppler on? Or, where I live to, they don't have ultrasounds just in the ED or the maternity. So they got the Doppler out. It was on a Saturday. She searched around, she couldn't find the heartbeat. And she's like, oh, it could just be too early. But I just knew then because I had heard the heartbeat a few times with the Doppler before. So I'm like, that just doesn't sit right with me. But I had to wait until the Monday to have an actual scan. So that was just the worst weekend. And everyone had said to me, you've got no reason to be worried. You're just letting your dreams and these intrusive thoughts control how you're feeling. But for someone that had never had a loss, that was an unusual feeling for me to feel like something was wrong. Anyway, so on the Monday, I went in for the urgent scan, but I went by myself because everyone was just like, I think it'll be fine. And I remember I got out of the car and as I walked off, I came back and I grabbed my sunnies because I was like, I just had a feeling that I was going to need them walking out of there. And I went in and I had a really good relationship with the ultrasound techs in there. And they were like, look, it'll be fine. Like, you don't have any bleeding and you've got no cramping and all of that stuff. And I got on the bed and just as soon as I got on there, she put the probe on and I just knew straight away the baby was there. It was fully still the same size, but it was just not moving and it was like upside down. And she was just, the ultrasound lady was just like, I can't believe it. I'm so sorry. There's just no heartbeat. And it had stopped. It looks like the measurements were maybe 2 days after my last scan. So it was, we couldn't make any sense of it. Sort of after that, it was a real shit show. Like my doctor, my OB was on holidays. So they put me in with this other doctor who's not really that liked around here, but I was like, I don't know what to do because I'd never had a loss before. So I went to her straight away and she said to me, oh, look, you've had a loss. I know that you're 15 weeks, but I don't want to do a D&C on you. You're too far along. She walked out of the office. She came back in with the misoprostol and handed them to me and said, go home, take these tablets, and it will be like a heavy period. So me and my husband were like, oh, well, is this what we're supposed to do? I had no idea. And she just dismissed me and was like, that's your best option. And we left and I was like, I'm not going to do it tonight because I don't want to be up all night. It was already traumatic finding out that news. And I spoke to a midwife and she rang me and said, do not take those tablets. You are not going to have just like this heavy period. You're going to probably be admitted to hospital and have to have a D&C anyway. And you're going to give birth to a fully formed baby. So I spent the next 7 days trying to get someone to do the surgery for me. And I ended up having to go to another doctor who then got me into someone in Melbourne. At one point, my only option was to go to an abortion clinic to have the surgery.
Oh my God. It gives me goosebumps. Like that is,
It was horrific.
oh
Yeah.
my,
So I finally got in with a specialist, and he said to me, I can't believe no one would do this because you want answers. And if we don't do the D&C, we can't send the baby off for testing, and why would anyone offer you the medication? So he did the surgery, he sent the baby off for testing, and then I bled for weeks and weeks. And I kept saying to him, I'm bleeding, something's not right, and I feel really off. And, because all I wanted to do after that was start trying again. And I know that some people don't want to, but I did. I was like, I just want to get pregnant again. And I couldn't because I was bleeding all the time. And I said, I feel like something's not right. So I went to my GP, and my specialist sort of dismissed me and said, it's normal to spot. And I'm like, I'm not spotting, I'm bleeding. I've been bleeding for weeks. Anyway, so he finally he gave me antibiotics first and said, oh, it just might be an infection, have this. Another week went by, I was still bleeding, and I said, I want an ultrasound. So they put me in for an ultrasound, and I had heaps of retained tissue. So I had to go through the D&C again. And then we did that, but he refused me any extra testing after that. So the baby was tested and came back genetically normal, no chromosome issues. So I never got any answer for what it was. And I was under the impression that it had to be linked to me getting COVID because, like, the timing was just, it was within a week, that I had lost the baby. Anyway, so he said, I won't do any more testing. You have to keep trying for 6 months. And if you don't conceive, then come back to me and I'll do some testing. And it just didn't sit right with me. So I left him, went to another specialist, and they did all of the tests. Like I had like 30 vials of blood taken and nothing was actually found. So we were like, okay, well, we'll keep trying. But then I couldn't conceive at all. And then I had my tubes flushed and did an ovulation induction. So I did the letrozole, the trigger shot, and progesterone. And that first cycle, I conceived. And I had a lot of bleeding in that pregnancy, but I had a lot of monitoring and a lot of scans, and they all showed baby was fine. So we were like, oh, everything's okay. I did weekly scans from, I think, 7 weeks. And then I did one at 11 weeks. Baby was perfect. Did one at 12 weeks and it was good. And then I did one, I think, at like 12 and a half weeks, and there was no heartbeat. And there was no answer for that either. So I went through the same process again, but with my specialist, she did the D&C straight away. But I had retained tissue again, so I had to go through the surgery again. So that baby was sent away and that came back genetically normal as well. So those two losses were both boys. So then there was like the theory that maybe I couldn't carry boys. Maybe I carried a genetic, like a gene that rejected having boys. After that loss, we were a bit like, I can't go through this again. I don't want to do it again. We're not going to go through any more medications and try anymore. And it was only, I think, 2 months after that I just found out I was pregnant. Like I just conceived. And I was like, this one's meant to be, we didn't try for this and this just happened. And it ended exactly the same, but this one was a girl. So that was probably my most traumatic loss. I went for all my scans again every week. Everything was great. And then I went to Melbourne for my discharge from your specialist at 12 weeks. They do your last one and then they hand you back to your OB. We were really excited to go down there. It was my last appointment. I'd had all these scans and I'd only had a scan 5 days before. So I was like, everything's really good. And I went into her office. As soon as she put the probe on, there was no heartbeat again. And so I went in for surgery for that one. I'm going to say like 3 days later. I think it was on a Friday, and then I went in on the Monday. And when you go in for a D&C, I'm not sure if you've had a D&C, but they give you the misoprostol while you're in the hospital just to start to open your cervix up. So it's easy for them to, remove what's in there. And they gave that to me while I was in the waiting area. And I'd taken it and I was there. And then they said to my husband, you can go now. You probably need to move your car and we'll ring you when she's ready to come out. She's going to go into surgery soon. And this was my 5th D&C for losses, including the retained tissue. So I was laying there, sort of knew what to happen. I started to get a little bit crampy. And then my water broke when I was in the waiting area. And I like buzzed the thing and said to the nurse, I think my water just broke because my whole bed was wet. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'm just going to get you to hop up." And I got up and the baby fell out onto the ground.
Thank God.
So all of these nurses and all of these doctors just come running in and they were like, "We're so sorry, this has never happened." And it was horrific. And I was in so much shock that I've just stood there like, "What do you mean?" And then my specialist come in, like they put the baby in like a little box and like gave me these little mittens and stuff. But that was probably for 5 minutes. And my specialist come in and she's like, "I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to take the baby to be able to send it away." And I was like, I don't know, like whatever, and they rang my husband and he's like, "I just left. She's by herself." And it was horrific. And then they still took me down for the DNC to, get everything else out. When I got down there, they said, "We're going to get you," because usually they'll move the beds next to each other and sort of say shift from that bed to that bed. But they were like, "I want you to walk from this bed over to here." And I think there was purpose to that because when I did that, all the placenta and everything just went all over the surgery floor. And I think I was only under maybe for a few minutes where they just did a quick, make sure I got everything out. And I didn't have any retained tissue from that one, probably because I naturally birthed it. And it was horrific. So that was, I think we're nearly 2 years ago that that one happened because after that we said we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So that was all of those losses. And then I think maybe 6 months after that, I said, I still need answers. Like, I need to know what's going on. So we started seeing a reproductive immunologist in Sydney, and he did all of these tests, and some of my immune markers came back, like my anti-nuclear antibodies, that came back positive, and my T cells were imbalanced. So he's like, we sort of came to the conclusion that when I caught COVID, it can cause an immune response in your body. So when the baby is getting to the point that the placenta's taking over, my body's attacking the placenta and starving off the baby. So I was given all of this immune medication if I wanted to try and conceive again. So I was doing that and I just couldn't conceive. So we were trying to get pregnant, couldn't do it. So then we went back to the specialist and did one ovulation induction and I fell pregnant straight away. This was at the start of last year, but it was a chemical. So a few days later, I lost it. So that was a whole new loss to me. Like I was used to having the late losses, not these chemicals. And I said, let's just keep trying. And I just kept moving the goalposts. Like, let's just do 2 more cycles. Let's just do 3 more cycles, just one more. I've got more medication left and I just couldn't let it go. And my husband just come home, it would have been August last year. And he said, how about we do IVF? I think we should do IVF. We might figure out what's going on. And we just thought that was going to be the answer. And I think I actually started IVF the same time you did because we were sort of on the same journey at that time.
Yeah. Okay.
And IVF just did not turn out for us.
So how far into the journey are you at this point when you have decided that you're going to try IVF? 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah.
Especially after that extremely traumatic experience in hospital. How did you process that and how did you keep moving forward? Because it is a lot to deal with. Was your coping mechanism to just keep going? Or like how did you cope in those moments and process what had happened?
A lot of therapy. I still see my psychologist for it. And that was when I started doing my fertility coaching and the grief coaching. And I started doing a bit of counseling and stuff. Like, I'm halfway through my course. I'm not really sure where I want to go with that, but that helped by helping other people and also sharing my story. So I've shared a lot of it on my social media, and that helped me to move through it because I didn't have to sit with it on my own. But to be honest, I really, really lost me as a person for a long time. And I think if I didn't have my kids, I don't know where I would be, but having them, I was like, this can't break me. I have to keep going. I have to keep showing up for them. And I will say the girls knew about our first pregnancy because I was so far along, and they were so excited. And having to tell them, it was probably the worst thing ever, you know. Yeah, it's still really hard. And we haven't told them about any of the other pregnancies. So we always wanted to wait till we got to that 15-week mark, but we never got there. So they knew that we were trying, but never knew when I was pregnant. And we're just trying to save their heartache. And we're really glad that we did. But yeah, it was very hard. And I think I've moved through a lot of it now, but I had to push so hard, you know, like I went back to the gym and I had to put so much focus on myself, but everything in my whole life changed, you know, my work, my friendships, my relationship, or everything, every aspect of me changed.
Yeah. Did you find it challenging to show up as a mum throughout that time?
Yeah, and I had a lot of guilt because I was like, I'm grieving these babies that never came earthside when I've got these two children here that need me. And, you know, I'm grieving these other babies that never came to life. Does that make sense? Like, it was horrible, but the guilt and yeah, it was just, yeah.
It's such a hard thing because you're also grieving the life that you envisaged for yourself. And although you've got these amazing children that you know you're so grateful for, it doesn't take that pain away.
No, and I think, like we said when we had our loss, we were like, it makes it so much harder that we know what that pregnancy turned into. Like you look at the girls and think that baby could have turned into an actual human. It puts a whole different perspective on it that like when you actually have gone through the pregnancy, given birth, you know that that pregnancy can turn into a person, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And did you find the decision to go to IVF challenging to make because you could conceive naturally? Was that hard for
No.
you or was it easy? Okay, yeah.
It was easy because I think I probably would have done IVF sooner, but I didn't think my husband would want to do it. He said to me, I'm not going to stop you because I'm not going to be the person that says we have to stop. I'm not doing this anymore. I think if when we started to try for the third, if it just never happened, I wouldn't have kept going for this long. But it's because I had that first loss that you sort of chasing something to replace, if that makes sense. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And was the advice from the fertility specialist that you saw at the time to go to IVF, was that their advice for you guys, or was that just kind of a decision you made?
Well, we had done 8 months back to back of ovulation induction with my specialist, and I didn't conceive once. And my cycle was like I was bleeding all the time, even through the progesterone, and there was really no answers for what was going on. So we were just sort of over it, and we thought, let's try IVF. And we went through Adora, so we went through the bulk billing, and that actually worked out to be a cheaper option than us to keep doing the ovulation induction cycles. So we thought, what have we got to lose? Let's just do it. And when we spoke to her, she said, yeah, I understand. She's like, because now it's not just recurrent miscarriage, now it's infertility, like you can't even conceive. And that was a new thing for us.
Yeah. Okay. Did you want to talk me through now your IVF journey and what those cycles looked like for you?
Yeah. So we started, that was last August, I think we started, and did all the CMs. I think I had maybe like 12 follicles on the scan, and they're like, it looks really good. And, you know, we're going to trigger and we'll go through. And I was so positive that this was just, we're going to be one and done. You know, we're going to do one round and I'm going to have our baby. And when I came out of surgery, so they were expecting 12 eggs. As soon as you wake up, you're like, how many eggs did I get? And the nurse is like, oh, you got 4. I'm like, what do you mean? I got 4 eggs. So I was devastated. Like, I just went through all of that just to get 4 eggs. And then only 1 fertilized. So it was still progressing. And then I went down to have the transfer because I'm not sure if every clinic's the same, but mine don't tell you until the morning of if there's no transfer, you know, so you sort of don't want that phone call. So I was down there with my mum came with me, and they called me that morning to say it hadn't progressed, sort of nothing to transfer. So went through that whole cycle and got nothing out of it. So we were devastated. I was so devastated, but I was like, we'll just do it again. I'll do another egg collection. But I went in with a whole plan myself. I was like, this is what I want. I want high sims. I want double, like a dual trigger. I want this and that. And she's like, okay, we'll do that. And in between the cycles, I took a month off. And then in that time, my husband had caught COVID. And I tell you, COVID has haunted us through these pregnancies and this fertility journey. But he caught COVID and had a really high fever. But I was like, it'll be fine because we're going to do ICSI anyway, because they only need a couple of good sperm in there and they'll inject it into the eggs. So this time I got a better result with my eggs and I had 10 eggs. So I was stoked with that. But they rang me saying, your husband's sperm wasn't very good this time. And so it had obviously wiped out heaps of his sperm. So that was great. But I'm like, it's all right. There still was some in there to inject into it and 7 fertilized. So we were like, we're in with a really good shot here. By the time we got to day 5, I only had 2, but they were both the top graded. Like they were very good quality, perfect embryos. So we did a fresh transfer and that didn't stick. So I was devastated, but I still had a frozen one. So it took, I think, 2 months off just to try and work on my body, get some inflammation down, settle my immune system, do some of the immune meds. And then I went back in for that frozen transfer and that didn't stick either. So there was no chemicals, nothing. They just didn't stick. And I had said already, I'm not doing any more than 2 egg collections because we had to draw the line somewhere and I didn't want to keep dragging it out forever. So that ended in December. And at that point, we were like, we're done. We're not going to keep trying anymore. My husband did talk about getting the snip just because he was like, do you want me to do this so then you don't even think about it? And I was like, you know what? I haven't actually been able to conceive for a couple of years. If I'm to conceive, then it's a miracle. So why would you do that, So since that ended, I just threw myself into the gym and I've lost, 10 kilos and really looked after myself and just completely shifted my focus, which has been probably the best thing for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Going into IVF, did you have any preconceived conceptions about like what that would look like? Did you think that would be quite straightforward and because you obviously have had kids naturally that it would just work for you?
Yeah. I honestly thought we'd do 1 round and that would be it, because I was like, we can make babies, we can make embryos. I knew that his sperm matches with my egg and, we make perfectly healthy little humans. And I've fallen pregnant so many times, so I knew that we could do it. I just thought with the help of the immune medication plus IVF, it's just going to be perfect. They're just going to put it in there and that'll be it. But no, it just
Yeah.
didn't work like that.
So you were on all the immune medication as well?
I think I did the immune medication for the first IVF round. And then because I'd been on the immune meds pretty much the whole year, we started to think maybe I was over suppressing my immune system and that it wasn't like a very nice environment for the embryo to go into. So I think for my last frozen transfer, I didn't take anything after the transfer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And did they give you any reasoning behind why, especially that first round of IVF was unsuccessful? Like, and they had 1 fertilized. Was it egg quality? Was there any information, or are you just kind of told to try
I didn't
again?
really know. She did say to me when I came out of my first surgery with the 4 eggs, oh, look, I'm really shocked. We expected so many more. We see this happen in people with endometriosis that, they might have poor egg quality. But then I ended up asking, was my egg quality bad? No, like the eggs were actually pretty good, but you just didn't get many of them. So then I was like, maybe I should have like endo surgery, to figure it out. But she just dismissed me and was like, look, your issue is recurrent miscarriage, not infertility. So I don't think you need to do endo surgery. And I'm like, yeah, but I bleed all the time out of my, like instead of I'll ovulate and then a few days later I'll start bleeding and I'll bleed up until my period will start and then I'll get a full-blown period. But no one cared about that. They were just like, oh, that can happen. You can spot before your period. But being a fertility coach too, I'm like, that's not normal. It's not normal to bleed, spotting maybe sometimes, but not full on bleeding for 2 weeks straight every cycle, So that's one of the reasons too that we were like, no one's listening to us. No one's giving us any answers. We can't keep doing this.
Yeah. And did you lean on any other external support, like a naturopath or anything, to try and help with your cycles throughout that time?
Yeah, I see a really good naturopath, nourishing apothecary, I think they're called, Jamie and Mel. They're really great. And I was having acupuncture all the time. I was seeing the guy here that does acupuncture for Chinese herbs. He was really good. I felt like I was doing everything. I had exhausted pretty much every avenue.
Which is exhausting within itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does things look like for you at the moment? Are you trying to do further investigations? Like, where are you sitting?
So when it failed back in December, we were like, we're not doing this anymore. And, that we haven't actually really had a conversation about it since, because that was sort of, I was like, if we do these IVFs and they don't work, I will draw the line, because I had to draw the line somewhere, because we'd been on this like for years and it had changed our whole life. I bet, because you're always like, oh, I can't book that holiday because I might be pregnant then. And, I don't want to travel if I'm pregnant. And our whole life revolved around it. And the girls are getting older. So after that failed, we booked a trip to Hawaii, and we have only just got back from there about a month ago. And that was sort of like, if IVF doesn't work, this is something that we've wanted to do for a couple of years. Let's go and do it. So we went to Hawaii, and I got a phone call when I was in Hawaii to say my endo surgery had been booked in. So right before I'll just go back a bit, before we went to Hawaii, I went back to my very first specialist, because he comes down to our town, and I was sick of driving back and forth to Melbourne. I'm like, I just needed answers for why I'm bleeding so much. And he said, you should have had this laparoscopy years ago. Like even after your second lost, someone should have done this surgery. He was just blown away that it had never been done. So I'm like, let's just do it, because I just want answers, whether that led to conception or not. I just wanted answers for why my body was behaving like that. So when I was in Hawaii, I got a phone call to say it had been booked in, I think 10 days after I got back from Hawaii. And I'm like, great, this is really good. I'm going to get answers. I came back from Hawaii, and I had taken like time off work because of the surgery. It was meant to be on the Friday. And on the Wednesday, they told me, you need to take a pregnancy test before you go in for your surgery, because, you can't do the surgery if you're pregnant. And I took a test, and I'm pregnant right now.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, wild timing. So 2 days before my surgery, I got this test, and I could have fainted, because I'm so used to taking tests, test after test, and thinking I can see a line. But it was only 8 days past ovulation, and I had a line. And I'm like, what do you mean? So I was like, they must be dodgy tests. So the next day I took another one, and it was darker. So now we're nearly 6 weeks pregnant at the moment. And I'm on all the immune medication, because I'm back in with my doctor in Sydney, and he's like, okay, well, we're going to throw everything at this. I've had an intralipid. I've got another intralipid next week. I'm doing everything. And so far, so good. But I did have pregnancy after loss is just fucked. I'm sorry to swear, but it is so horrible. And every day I'm like, I'm really blessed that, this has just happened, and us trying for all of this time, and then I've just conceived. I've just gotten pregnant, it was crazy. And we're both just blown away that it's just happened. And I would never be someone to say, go on holidays and you'll get pregnant, because it's not as simple as that. But somehow that worked for me. And so far, all good. But at the start of this week, I had a bit of a bleed. So I was like, great, this sucks. I rang my specialist, and he said, oh, you need to have the anti-D, because I'm a negative blood group. So I went to my OB, and she's like, yeah, okay, because it was only one time at the bathroom. It wasn't like progressing bleeding, if that makes sense. And I showed her a picture, and she's like, oh, you're a bit too early for a scan. So you're going to have to wait till next week, which I've got a scan this Monday coming. But she said, look, what I can do for you is I'll do a bedside scan with her little handheld one, just to make sure it's not ectopic and it's not, just to make sure it's in the uterus. So she put that on there, and there's two in there.
Oh my God. How did you process that? Number one.
So this has only just happened in the last couple of days.
Yeah, okay, that's huge news. Wow.
Yeah, so from the minute that I actually got the positive test, I was like, I reckon it's twins, because my lines were just so dark. And I've done quite a few HCGs and my levels are really high. Like I'm 5.5 weeks and I'm already at over 20,000 in HCG. And I looked back at my previous pregnancy and I was only at 5,000 by now. I'm like, this is really high. And when she put it on, she goes, oh, I can see it. It's in the uterus. Like I can see the yolk sac. And then she laughed and she goes, can you see that? And she showed me and it flicked between the two sacs. And I'm like, I knew it. I knew it. But then I had to come home and tell my husband.
How did he process that information?
He just stared at me. He's like, what does that mean? I was like, it means there's two in there.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, there's a lot of mixed feelings there. I think because I'm already high risk, this makes me even more high risk. But look, I'm just enjoying every day to be like, I'm just hoping that the fact that I just conceived means something might have shifted in my body over the years. Maybe it's healed itself a little bit. And I've got all this support from all the immune medication and all the progesterone and all of this, that I'm just hoping that they stick, Now I'm not worried about just one sticking. Now I'm like, I hope they both stick.
Yeah. And
It's a whirlwind,
yeah, I can imagine. And that was going to be my question of how are you coping at the moment? Because although there would be so much joy, I could imagine there is a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And, how are you moving through this time? Because the early weeks of pregnancy are honestly the hardest part. So, yeah.
Look, at the start, I was like, I feel really good. I'm really positive. I'm just really excited. My husband was sort of freaking out. And I was like, let's not think like that. But I don't know if it's a mixture between some of the medication that I'm taking and also pregnancy after loss. But some days I'm just like, I don't even want to get out of bed or I do get out of bed, but it's at like 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm so rattled with anxiety. And those early days where I was taking the test every morning to see the line progression, I'm hiding in the bathroom to take the test, and then you get a bit of relief because the test's a bit darker. But then it gets to a point where they don't really get any darker. So you're like, is that one darker than that one? Or is my wee too diluted? And then the weekend just gone, I took a test thinking that it's going to say 3+ because I was like, my levels were 1,500 a few days ago. So they would have doubled to this amount in 3 days and blah, blah, blah. And it came up 2 to 3. So then I started spiraling, thinking, this is the end of it. And I was devastated. I took another one the next morning and it was 3+. So my urine would have just been a bit diluted. And then I did a blood test the next day and I was at 13,000. So it's just all these things just mess with your head. Every time I go to the toilet, I'm checking the toilet paper. So then when I seen the blood the other day, I was like, oh, which is crazy that I'm so concerned about seeing blood because none of my losses started with bleeding. They were all miscarriages. So blood has never been associated with my losses, but you still don't want to see it, especially in early pregnancy or at any time in pregnancy. But yeah, I've definitely spiraled some days and I had a lot of cramping. I'm going to say earlier this week, like Monday, and I was like, I'm really crampy, but it was also like, those dull period like cramps that you're like, something's happening in there. It's all just stretching. And then the next day I had the bleeding. So that didn't make me feel great. But then when I was Googling about the bleeding in early pregnancy, a lot of the forums were like, this is how I found out I was having twins. I had bleeding and had an early scan, blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
Oh, that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. So
Wow.
we will see.
Yeah. I'm so hopeful for you that these ones are the one. Also, it's a really interesting piece. Like, I don't think there's that much information out there around like the impacts COVID can have on your fertility. Even interesting, like with your husband's sperm. I personally had never heard of anything like that. So I don't think that's like a really known fact either.
It's not from COVID itself, like with his sperm. It is from the heat, like with the really high temperature. So even like if they're having hot baths and saunas a lot, the heat will kill the sperm. So when he had a really high temperature for like 5 days, and it just must have wiped his sperm out. And we knew that because we'd done the egg collection not long before, and his sperm was fine then. It was only like 2 months later, they were like, "What's happened?" And I was like, "Oh, well, he actually got COVID." Yeah, so hi. There's so many things, and there's so many things I had my husband doing. Like, we have a sauna here, and I was giving him an ice pack and being like, "You have to put the ice pack down there if you're going to have a sauna." He's such a trooper. He did everything, and he was always like, "Well, how long am I going to have to do this for?" And now it's crazy that I've just conceived, and like he wasn't doing the ice pack, he wasn't doing anything. I was in Hawaii and I was drinking every day, like
Yeah. It's wild that you can go down a lot of rabbit holes with fertility, and it makes perfect sense. You want to be doing everything you possibly can. But then, yeah, sometimes I think that can cause you a little bit more stress than,
Yeah, for sure. And when you're trying to, I spoke to my reproductive immunologist and he said, I actually see this happen a lot when people stop IVF and they stop things and then they naturally conceive. He said, sometimes some people's bodies just need that natural selection, without you trying to control everything and force it. And I'm like, oh, I'll go with that.
yeah. And will you be taking these medications up until 12 weeks, or how does that
Probably
work?
longer because my latest loss was at 15 weeks. I think he said to me, so he's already started the immune testing and he's just going to see where my levels are at and he'll just adjust it. And I'm on a lot. Like, I just feel like I'm popping pills and injecting myself all the time. But that's fine because I'm happy to do whatever I can do. And I did ask him the other day and he said, we're not going to roll the dice and, do trial and error and see what's going to happen because the error is that you lose the baby again. So I'll probably be on a lot of it. I could be on some of it for the whole pregnancy.
Yeah. And how are you feeling just symptoms wise? Have you been feeling unwell because your HCG has been high?
So I have never had morning sickness in any of my pregnancies.
That's my.
I've been actually pretty symptom free in all of my pregnancies, like a little bit of that dull, crampy feeling. I have had a bit of morning sickness this week, which is reassuring. Like it makes you, which is weird. Like no one wants that, but I'm like, oh, this is this is a sign. My boobs have been a bit sore, and that's probably it.
Yeah.
So hopefully.
Yeah. There's no normal, like everyone's bodies.
And also the prednisolone is actually used for some people with hyperemesis, like with HG.
Ah.
So I'm on 20 milligrams, which is quite high of prednisolone. So that's going to stop any of the nausea as well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I just want to go back. So obviously you spoke about once you decided to stop IVF, you said you sort of decided to focus on yourself, go on a holiday, get to the gym, do the things that make you feel good. Throughout the time that you were going through all of the fertility stuff or focusing really heavily on the fertility stuff, did it change the way that you saw yourself and your body in any way?
Oh, fully. Everything. I dressed different. I just felt uncomfortable all the time. I bloated all the time. Everything. I quit the gym because I was like, oh, they said don't do anything too high active, this and that. And I was walking only. But when I just said, no, I need to start looking after myself again, getting back into that gym and eating properly and losing weight, I finally felt like I was sort of getting myself back. And now I'm back here again. But hopefully, all of those things that I've done are the reason that I've conceived because I've sort of looked after myself, poured into my health, and.
Yeah. And then also I just have a question around the secondary infertility piece. Have you found that hard to navigate at times, considering you do already have two children? This might be a hard question to answer, but I mean, from responses you've had from external relationships and people, I know personally a lot of the time people will say you should be grateful for what you've got. And I don't know whether you had any of those conversations or found it hard to navigate or explain what you're going through to other people.
Yeah, definitely. Like so many people have said, well, at least you have kids. Imagine if you didn't have kids, and I'm like, that doesn't mean that these losses aren't painful to me. And I've had people say to me, well, at least you can get pregnant. And I'm like, well, what use is that if I'm losing them, you know? So, yeah, I've had a lot of people not, and this is why I'm so vocal about it on my socials about secondary infertility, because there's a lot of talk about infertility and people that can't get pregnant at all, but then it's a whole different thing. And there is a bit of a stigma around it because it's like, well, you should just be grateful for what you've got. You know, why do you want more? And for me, I don't just have one, I've got two kids, you know, so that's different again because people are like, you've got two kids, why do you need a third? Why are you doing this to yourself? And, you know, yeah.
Yeah, a hard thing. It doesn't take away from your grief and the way that you pictured your life and the losses that you've had as well. So it is a really hard thing to navigate. Hey, well, thank you. You've given so much amazing. I wouldn't say amazing, but just like it's really good for people to listen to this and just the importance of self-advocation, I think, when it comes to fertility. Do you have any advice for anyone who might be maybe to begin with kind of new to infertility or might be trying and it's just not happening for them at the moment?
I think that if you think something's wrong, you need to push for those tests without, you know, I'm so big on you don't have to wait to have 3 losses to have investigation. 1 loss is too many, you know, and if your specialist says no, find another one. They're not the doctor for you. And there's so many things you can do to do your own investigation now. Like you can order your own blood test and you can do your own investigation if you need to, but you just have to keep pushing for yourself because no one else is going to do it. I think before I went on any of this fertility journey, I was such a pushover. I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. And now I'm the biggest person to speak up for myself. I was like, no, no, I don't want that. And this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. And then is there anything you'd like to say to someone who might have, recently had a loss or might be experiencing recurring loss as well?
I'm hoping that in, say, next year, I can give the hope that, you know, miracles happen after all of this loss. Like, don't stop pushing to find the answers. You want the answers. And I think if I could have gone back, I would have pushed to probably take some of the immune medications after my first loss or even after the second loss. Instead, I went through that 3 times, you know, without them giving me anything else. And they were like, oh, maybe it was just unlucky the first 2. But you're not unlucky 3 times, it all happening exactly the same, you know?
For sure. And then just finally, what supports can you offer people with your fertility coaching and grief coaching?
Yeah, so I do online coaching where I sort of, a lot of my clients will do 12-week packages and we have like a meeting sort of like this every 2 weeks. And it's just a really safe space for them just to unload how they're feeling. I can sort of help them. Like I've got a couple of clients that are seeing specialists and they're just so dismissed by them. And I can help them sort of understand the gaps of what they need to be asking for. Like I've had a client that her specialist said, look, you've got low progesterone, but she's offered her no solution for it. So she's just said, you've got low progesterone, keep trying. And I said, has she given you progesterone or has she done any extra testing? No. And like some people, they don't know what to ask for. So I can just hold that space for them to be like, okay, when you go into that appointment, I want you to request this. And, you know, it's really helped them to sort of have the knowledge of, you know, what they need to do.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. And I'm going to be literally crossing every part of my body for you. And I'll be checking in closer to when this comes out. And hopefully, we can give everyone a really positive update.
I know. Hopefully, by the time this comes out, and
Yeah.
yeah, no one even knows. Only my mum and my husband. So
My lips are
keep
sealed.
this in lock.
You don't know me, so I can't.
I know.
Well, thank you so much, Abby.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I checked back in with Abby a few months later to see where she was up to on her journey and how her pregnancy was going. Here's the rest of her story. Welcome back to the podcast, Abby. Thank you so much for meeting with me again and checking in. Last time we spoke, you were about 5 weeks pregnant. So I'd love to hear from you how things have been and, yeah, what's happened.
Sure. So I am just a little bit over 18 weeks pregnant now. So we're pretty close to halfway. I think when we spoke last time, I had just been to the doctors and there was 2 sacs. So we were waiting to confirm if they were twins. And as the journey sort of unfolded, I think it was only a few days after I spoke to you, I went for an actual scan, and there was indeed twins, and we carried, like, they were fraternal twins, so in two separate sacs, and we carried both of those twins until 11 weeks, and then at 11 weeks we unfortunately lost baby B. So that's been quite challenging, but we are very happily still pregnant with baby A, and baby B is still in there and will be in there until we give birth to this little baby. But it's been a very strange time, sort of holding the grief in one hand and then hope in the other hand. So it's been very different to my other losses. But yeah, I'm still pregnant, which is fantastic, and I'm still taking all of the immune medications. I think we might have spoken about that earlier, that I had started all the medications to try and help me not keep having these recurrent miscarriages. And so far, everything's really good. So we're having another little girl. So we found that out a few weeks ago when we told the kids. We found out at 15 weeks. We had to wait a little bit longer because of there being two in there with the NIPT. It's a bit hard for them to do the gender, but yeah, that's sort of where we're at.
Thank you so much for sharing. And on one hand, congratulations, but on the other hand, I'm
Thank you.
so sorry to hear. I can imagine it would have been a really tough time to hold both fear and joy at the same time. I'd love to know how you have navigated this pregnancy so far and how you have moved through those tough moments and you're still moving through now.
I think it helped that I knew that I was literally doing everything I possibly could. So my doctor that I work with in Sydney had put me on pretty much every immune medication that you could think of. So we were covered from the basis of, if it was a blood clotting issue, I was taking something for that. If it was my immune system, I was taking something from that. So that gave me a little bit of peace. I think I just chose to have peace in that and be like, I can't control what's going to happen here. I think having weekly scans, so we had weekly scans from week 5 until week 15. So I had a lot of scans, and I think it also helped to go each day I was pregnant was a good day, if that makes sense, rather than getting too far ahead of myself. So that definitely helped by getting every day that I had got to take my medication at nighttime or did my injections. I'm like, this is a good thing because I'm still pregnant. I'm only taking this because I'm pregnant. So that has helped in the whole of the pregnancy. And then we were very shocked when we lost baby B at 11 weeks. We were actually not that nervous for that scan, to be honest. Like, we both sat there and were like, everything's been so great every other week. And both of the babies had perfect heartbeats and their growth was really good. And then we went in for that scan and we knew instantly, because I've been there quite a few times. But yeah, it just really took our breath away because we're like, what do you mean one of them doesn't have a heartbeat? But it's been a very different time because with my other losses, it was, we need to have a D&C and we need to do testing and we need to do this straight away. And it was all a big rush. You don't want to get infections and this and that. But with this one, nothing happens, the baby just stays in there and it's still visible on all the scans that we've had since. And it's been a very strange time. Like, we came home and we just sort of looked at each other like, we're so devastated. But on the other hand, we are so grateful that I'm still pregnant. There's still a baby that's thriving. And yeah, I don't know. We have tried to make a bit of sense of it. And we've sort of thought, maybe with all of my history, maybe the universe gave me two because I needed extra something to keep one safe to make it to Earthside. And that's sort of given us a little bit of peace, I guess. We're never going to know what happened. So I think we're just rolling with it. We've decided that when we give birth, we will, so the baby B will come out with the placenta, and we are going to keep the placenta and we're going to bury it. So then this baby that we do bring Earthside has a little place to go to see its sister and, things like that. Have sort of, I don't know, I can't really explain. It's been a very strange time because we're just trying to wrap ourselves up in how blessed we feel that I did fall pregnant unexpectedly, and, it's a miracle that I even fell pregnant to start with, let alone with twins, that my body was able to do it after everything that's happened. So we're just trying to hold so much gratitude for the pregnancy that's still continuing.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it's just a gentle reminder that two things can be true at one time and you can feel all kinds of emotions at once. And it's okay to feel all the things
Yeah.
you're feeling.
And if anything ever proved it to me, it's been this scenario. I've always known that you can be grateful and really devastated at the same time, and two things can exist. But this has been so in our face because we're like, they're literally both there. And on this side, we're devastated, and this side, we're so excited and hopeful. So, yeah, it is a good reminder.
Yeah, and this might be quite an invasive question, so please feel free not to answer if you're not comfortable to do so. But have you found it challenging to be carrying both babies now, knowing that news, or like how has that felt for you?
Yeah, it has been challenging. And sometimes it's sort of out of my mind. And then I get this big wave of sort of grief. It's like, oh, that other baby's still in there. Like baby B is still in there. I've been like, baby A's just got its own little guardian angel still in there with it now. That's just, we can't do anything about it. I think I've tried to think of it because we lost it at 11 weeks. If there was something wrong, and they did say maybe there was something not quite right with baby B, and that's why it didn't progress. I think I've tried to be a little bit like, well, I'm glad it didn't happen later on, or we found out later on about there was something wrong with it because that would have just put us in a whole other category of hurt. So if we had to make a decision about one baby and it could have harmed the other baby, but because it happened early enough, we don't have to intervene. Yeah. So
Yeah. And is that quite normal if this happens in multiple pregnancies that if you do lose one of the babies, you carry it through?
yes, so only if they're in two separate sacks. I can't speak on if they were identical in the same sacks because when I did speak to my specialist, he said because they're in two separate sacks, we do nothing. That baby may absorb into your body over time, or it will just stay the same size. And when you give birth to baby A, it will come out with the placenta, but you'll still see it on the ultrasound. But as baby A gets bigger, it will look smaller. So it'll be harder to see. But he said we would be having a very different conversation if they were both in the same sacks. So I'm not really sure. I didn't dive into that, but I do believe it would be a very different, situation.
Yeah. Okay. And now that you are 18 weeks pregnant, has some of that ease lifted and how are you feeling about the remainder of your pregnancy?
It definitely has because I'm starting to feel her move. So I just couldn't wait to be able to feel her move because I don't get sick in pregnancy, so I don't have a lot of symptoms at all. And that's been across the board with all of the pregnancies I've had, even with the girls that I have. So usually that you would think that's a great thing, but not when you have had losses because you're like, I don't want to feel normal. I want to feel pregnant. So I just couldn't wait to be able to feel her move. So then it was a bit of reassurance, like, oh, she is in there. Something's going on. But we haven't had a scan since 15 weeks, and I've got a scan tomorrow. So we're looking forward to doing that. And then we'll have another one for our 21 week. So as time gets further on, I can breathe a little bit more. But yeah, it's still there. And I really think I will hold my breath until she's born.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that feeling. I want to know how it felt telling your girls.
Oh, it was just the best. The day before we told them, so we'd planned to tell them we were camping and we were sitting outside and there were stars and there was a shooting star and my youngest, she just turned 9 and she said, oh, I've made a wish on the star. And I said, oh, what did you wish for? And she goes, I can't tell you because it won't come true, but it's the same wish that I've made on all of my birthday candles for the last couple of years and every shooting star. And we were like, oh, thinking it might have been a toy or something. And she said, and just so you know, it's not for a toy. It's something that the whole family will love. But I do have a feeling that it might happen soon because I've been seeing a few hints and we looked at each other like, oh, she knows. So then when we told them the next day, she just jumped up and she's like, that was my wish. And we're like, we know. So beautiful. So it'll be so nice to tell her her little sister when she's, a bit older, that she was every birthday candle and every shooting star for her, So it's been so lovely, and the girls are just obsessed. They're forever kissing my tummy, and they've waited a long time for this.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It just gave me goosebumps when you told that story. Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
Really wishing you all the best for the rest of your pregnancy, and I can't wait till this little girl is earthside. There's no one else in this world more deserving than you and your family. So thanks for jumping back on and sharing the rest, almost the rest of your journey,
Yeah.
following along. Is there anything else you wanted to share today?
No, that it's just nice to fill in the gaps from what's happened since we last spoke, considering we had to wait to put the podcast out. Yeah. So
Yeah,
thanks for having me back on.
that's okay. Thanks, Abbey. This has been The Space Between Two Lines. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and register on our website to share your story. The link is in the bio. Until next time.